Since the dawn of modern medicine, mental asylums or madhouses have earned a dark and troubling reputation. Often started with good intentions, these institutions soon descended into places of abhorrent conditions, medical misconduct, human experimentation, and even torture of society's most vulnerable citizens. But among the many psychiatric institutions around the world, the following asylums rank above them all for their inhumane treatment and lasting legacies of fear. Enter, if you will, history's most notorious asylums where medicine and healing went hand in hand with brutality and abandonment. 5. Bedlam. Easily the most famous mental asylum in the world, the name of this building has become a euphemism for chaos and confusion in the modern lexicon. Originally located in Bishopsgate just outside the walls of the City of London, the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, more commonly known as Bedlam, is one of the world's oldest hospitals to specialize in mental illnesses. Founded in the 13th century under the reign of Henry III, historians are unsure of the exact date when it officially became an asylum, but records show that it was accepting mentally ill patients in large populations by the 15th century, with a name that has literally become synonymous with madness in modern slang. The conditions of Bedlam are famously among the worst in history. The scandalous reputation of the facility began in 1403 when the hospital treasurer, Peter Taverner, was found guilty of embezzling hospital funds. This was around the same time the hospital began formally accepting mentally ill patients through its doors. The hospital had a reputation as a shabby, run-down place for some time before it was relocated to Moorfields in the 17th century. There, it installed 2 statues outside, where melancholy and raving madness greeted incoming patients at the front gates. The horrific treatments for patients include being hung from the ceiling and spun at the direction of a doctor until the patient vomited or was beset with severe vertigo. Patients were routinely beaten and starved, routinely dunked in ice baths and held in straitjackets. Bloodletting, cupping, and inducing blisters was also routine. The facility opened its doors to the public in the hopes of encouraging patronage from visitors, but instead received wealthy Londoners taking in the sights like an attraction. In the 20th century, Bethlehem was moved to its current location at Monk's Orchard in West Wickham. Modern archaeological projects at the Bishopsgate site uncovered mass graves of patients who died under the care of the hospital. The facility remains open to this day, where it has taken on modern, safe practices for treating patients, but its dark and enduring legacy lingers on. 4. Waverly Hills Sanatorium. The complex has its beginnings as a humble one-ring-room schoolhouse named the Waverly School, so named after novels by Walter Scott. The surrounding area was later changed to Waverly Hill, and the name remained when the land was purchased to build a much larger sanatorium in the late 19th century. The Board of Tuberculosis Hospital took ownership of the land after an outbreak swept the area in the early 1900s. Soon, rumors were rife of patient mistreatment and human experimentation. Reports of bloody surgeries that involved opening chest cavities to insert balloons into lungs, and the removal of ribs to allow the damaged lungs to expand were rife. It's believed as many as 64,000 people who were admitted to Waverly Hills died there over the years. It closed under the name Waverly Hills in 1964 and reopened the following year under the name Woodhaven Geriatric Center as a nursing home and place for the elderly, mentally handicapped citizens. It was closed again in the 1980s due to neglect. In 1983 the buildings were purchased with the intent of converting it into a minimum security prison, but members of the community protested and the project was abandoned. The property was purchased in 2001 by the Mattingly family, who turned it into a haunted attraction and has since been a venue for music festivals and featured by paranormal investigators on Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted, and Ghost Hunters. Three. Narrenturm. Austria is renowned its art, food, and culture, but one dark secret it boasts is that of a defunct mental institution in Vienna. One of the first asylums ever built, from outside the Narrenturm, Austrian German for Fools Tower, looks more like a medieval prison than a place of treatment. Dating back to 1784, the construction was overseen by Emperor Joseph I, who purposely designed it like a fortress, built over the site of a former Capuchin monastery, where, in the basement, the monks hid away their mentally unbalanced brethren. The circular stone building held 139 cells, each was equipped with chains for restraining inmates. The building, however, was soon obsolete as medical science quickly advanced to the idea of treating the mentally ill rather than confining them in prison-like conditions. Thereafter, the tower served as a housing building for medical staff and eventually a museum. Today the museum boasts a large collection of medical anomalies, such as syphilitic skulls that resemble Swiss cheese, jars of disfigured fetuses, and graphic wax displays of untreatable diseases. 2. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Possibly one of the most infamous mental health institutions in the United States thanks to its robust history of hauntings. This institution was open from 1864 to 1994 in West Virginia. It was designed to treat a maximum of 250 patients but, at its peak, held over 2,000 in the 1950s. The result was neglect, abuse, and lack of treatment for the patients within the hospital. This was largely due to misdiagnosis. Alcoholics, people with epilepsy, and those with learning disabilities were sent to the hospital alongside those with more severe mental handicaps. In the 1980s, the population had lowered significantly as the study of mental illness evolved. However, it was uncovered that patients who were uncontrollable were routinely being locked in cages. Upon this grim discovery, the state governor elected to build a new and modern facility. It was intended that the Trans-Allegheny become a prison, but the facility closed in 1994. The building remains largely abandoned and subject to decay and vandalism. 1. Beechworth Lunatic Asylum. Once known as the Mayday Hills Lunatic Asylum, this institution is located in Victoria, Australia and was among the top 3 mental institutions in the area as of its opening in 1867. Uniquely surrounded by 106 hectares of farmland, this was one of the few institutions that also utilized ha-ha walls, which were fairly low walls that featured a trench on one side, bringing the height of the wall high enough that a patient could not escape. It served as a place of rehabilitation, with many patients put to work as farmers and landscapers for the surrounding area, as well as providing materials for pursuing work as shoemakers, blacksmiths, painters, and carpenters. Community members regularly pitched in for recreational activities and the comforts of patients throughout the decades. During its 127-year run, it is believed that as many as 9,000 patients died in the facility. By the 1950s, a change in methods resulted in physical treatment being implemented. These treatments involved straitjackets, restraints, and electroshock therapy to encourage calmness in patients who did not respond to recreational forms of therapy. Bone and ligament injuries became the norm from the excessive force of shock therapy that caused the patient's body to contort in response to the electric stimuli. The darkness of this institution, however, did not truly appear until after it closed. Beechworth is said to be the most haunted place in Australia.